Okay, so here we are, we're on chapter 11, human resource management. Now, when we talk about human resource management, we're speaking at a higher level. We're not just talking about hiring people, we're talking about the vice president of HR, the department managers, and how they have to look at what human resources is about for them. So, and keeping employees. So take a moment, and we have 2 pages here of learning objectives, and they're really important to understand insofar as this chapter. So on your own, I want you to go over these, and actually also at the back of the chapter, there's a summary on them. Please take a moment and review them. Okay, working with people. Yes, it is just the beginning. The concept is that we have to realize that human resource management, HRM, is understanding the needs for a company, the goals set by the company for how they're going to hire people and how they're going to be bringing people on board with that company. So what does that mean? How many employees do they need? How many different departments within them? So let me go back here for a moment. So we look at HR in a different way because of what's going on in the world. And we're looking at it right now in action, the changes. How important employees are, but how they will change as we move along, and how the laws affect those change. And we've seen that a lot with diversity on a very large scale lately, and definitely with healthcare needs. So in this oblong or oval shape here, it's considered the legal environment because there's so many laws that are attached to human resources and their organizational goals of the company. And it always starts at the top here with recruitment, as I point to it here. Recruitment is where it all begins. What do they need in the business? And then the idea of selection, the moving around, training and development, motivation, evaluation, compensation and benefits, scheduling on up to employee unions, which is very huge. We do that next the next chapter, chapter 12. And then career management. And, somebody has their sound on, please turn it off. Okay. So when we're looking at how we get started, we have to look at the different levels of generations we have. We talked about that on Tuesday, 5 different generational types of cultures, and how those different cultures function in business. And right now, there's definitely no shortage of trained workers because of how many people are losing their jobs right now. But what we're having to look at normally on the big scheme of things is as industry changes, we end up having a shortage of trained workers. And that's what normally happens as industries change, as technology changes, as production changes, what your goals for the business are, they change. Being skilled and trained is huge, as you're doing right now. You're doing something to improve your lives right now, to give you more skills for your future. This is what I always say, you hear me a lot with this. You know, no one can take away your education, always add to it and encourage people to do that. So as we were looking at, we have a lot of, we used to have a lot of single parent families. Now we have more 2-income families. It's changed where 2 incomes are coming in. Of course, don't hold your breath on right now.
Miss Allison?
Yes.
Sorry, but we can't see your screen. Like, it's just like frozen. There's no slides showing up.
But you can hear me, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for saying something, Tassa.
Yeah.
Let me take a look here. You can see me, but you can't see my screen.
Like, you can't see your computer screen. Like, it
I
just
can't
like,
see the slides you're talking about.
You don't see the slides at all?
no.
No.
Okay, let's see what's happening here. Okay, so what has transpired, and this is why we're in the legal environment, has to do with all the laws that control how employment works. So it came about even more so with the Civil Rights Act in 1964. There are 6 items that always have to be considered when we're hiring people. And these items cannot be brought up at all in regards to positions. So cannot discriminate when we're talking about race, religion, creed, sex, national origin, or age. And they've actually added in the word culture. They've started saying people have different cultures, which goes along with religion. For instance, for people who might be Muslim, they need to have time to do their prayers. You cannot use that against them ever in the employment environment because they need to have that time. We need to respect that. So that means you can't use that against them for hiring them. But they also need to know, and this is very important, let's say a person's getting hired to work on a production line and may have cultural issues. That person, you might suggest to them that maybe this might not be the right job for them because they may have to stay on the line consistently or maybe in a different place within the business. So there's different things that need to be communicated so that there's no discrimination placed upon people, especially for people with health issues. You can never discriminate against somebody who is blind, deaf, in a wheelchair, an amputee, quads. But we also need to discuss with people their ability to actually do the job. And you have to learn how to communicate things with the American Disabilities Act and to do it appropriately. And that's another conversation we need to have more often. So moving on. So the Equal Opportunity Act, which came about, which this has to do with what I was just talking about, it also requires a very stringent and transparent process of record keeping of procedures. So if you don't do that as an employer, if somebody has a discrimination act against you for any case of any kind, if you don't have records about what's been going on, they could easily win. Not that you want to lose or win, but it's a circumstantial thing. You have to track what you're doing. And so does that individual, but something that needs to be paid attention to from the human resource side. Management needs to make sure they have policies in place with HR. There's a lot of rules HR has to follow. So affirmative action, right to past wrongs, which helped with women and minorities. And this came along early Vietnam days. It started back in World War I and II with minorities of women who are not getting paid the right wages. And we see this changing. And it's happening more and more. Increase in salaries to where equity amongst all. And when I say equity, I mean equal pay for equal work. There is also reverse discrimination, and we've seen this in the hiring process where whites or males don't get jobs because maybe a business needs to hire more women or more other cultural individuals, so they fill slots. You got to be very careful about that, and that's wrong. If a person isn't qualified for the position, that's what it comes down to. It has nothing to do with your color. The 6 items I mentioned, you have to be very careful with that. Okay. So part of the Civil Rights Act changed in '91, and it was amended. We call it Title VII. So victims before didn't have a leg to stand on when they were discriminated against before. Now they can have a jury trial, and it says possible damages. It all depends on the circumstances. It also has to do with your hiring process. You may sign a contract where you actually can have in detail where they say if you try to file a lawsuit, you don't get to win anything. You make sure you read the detail in your hiring contracts to know how and what your rights are in case you were in a situation. You should know that. There are also compliance programs, federal contract compliance programs, OFCCP. So if you're a contractor, you also have certain laws in the federal government that are a little different than private business, and you have to know what they are as a federal employee or even a state employee. And we're going to talk about unions in the next chapter, but this is mostly regarding union work, because every single federal employee is in a union of some kind. Okay, and I mentioned about disabilities, and now I'm going to throw in there older employees, those usually over what we say 45, 50. There's a break in how a lot of companies look at older employees today. And so we have to look at the differences with physical and mental disabilities also for employment. Some people's disabilities today are not considered as disabilities. And unless you inform your employer that you have a disability, or during the hiring process, it comes up because maybe the type of job you need to be able to do the work. For instance, some jobs say you have to be able to carry 50 pounds or climb a ladder. And I think we talked about this once in class already, where maybe you can't climb that ladder up a wall, maybe even 10 or 15 feet, or maybe you have to do a high-end work in construction, being up on the big scaffolding and high-rise buildings, and you don't have the ability to do that. Well, maybe that job isn't for that person, but maybe that person's a good person to have, but maybe in a different area again. But different disabilities are seen in different ways for every business. So you need to be able, if a person has a physical one, you can ask for permission to talk about that for the job to make sure that they are comfortable with the work they're doing, because you do not want them to feel discriminated against ever. Okay, so I think I've covered that. Okay, moving on here. Then we have the age discrimination, ADIA, it's age 40. And things are changing now. The fact of being discriminated at 40 comes in different shapes and colors here. And unfortunately, especially like today, when we look at what's going on in the world, age doesn't matter. If your job is not one that's needed, you could get laid off. Now, if a person feels that they can do work after 40, depending on the type of job, if it's a physical one, if it's one that requires a lot of mental, cognitive work, then it may be questioned if they're having problems remembering things on a regular basis, if they forget to do things. It all is circumstantial. So there has to be a tracking of information. If the person has been written up, and we're going to talk about terminations. I'm going to mention this as part of this. If your employer goes to terminate you, whether it's a layoff or straight firing, if you think it's because of your age, got to make sure it's not, and that they're doing the right thing. Because if it's of your age, because you think you can't physically or mentally do the work any longer, make sure it's done in the right way, an ethical manner, because it can come back on the employer if you let go of someone incorrectly. So you need to do some planning. And planning requires a really broad process. You need to know what kind of employees you need for the business. How many? I can imagine when Bill Gates started growing his business, he didn't have any idea how many employees he needed initially, but he knew what kinds of employees, the types of jobs he needed. And what I mean by that is, for instance, he knew he needed people in IT, people who could do programming, people who could build hardware and software. The number in the beginning is always difficult. Now, if it's a restaurant, you're going to have a basic idea. You need a person to seat people, you need a chef, you need someone to set tables, or maybe the same person who does the cleanup and the washing of dishes. Sometimes you can get away with 3 or 4 people, but not for long because you're going to burn people out, right? So you need to have alternate individuals available. And that's for any business, of course. So down the road, as you grow, you need to be able to project. So we call that forecasting. Let's say, for instance, you decide you're at such a place, you need to move from a 3-office building into a building with 20 offices, and you're ready to move up. Now, 20 offices may also mean more than 20 employees. Actually, they may be big rooms, and maybe it's a call center. And so you'll have to be looking down the future, how to project the fact that you're going to be hiring down the future and be prepared for that. The job analysis, the detail of it, what's really needed, what kind of skills are needed for that individual. And this is the plan. You will want to get out your PERT and your Gantt charts and lay out a scheduling for the different steps to go forward. So we're going to get into that in a minute here, okay? So let's first look more into the job analysis. What is really done by those jobs with various job titles? And it's very simplistic, but very detailed. So let's say, for instance, industrial engineer. Industrial engineer has really 3 job types that go with that heading, depending on the industry. Unfortunately, some people get very confused by that, industrial engineer. That could actually mean a degreed position where that person has a college degree in industrial engineering, and that is at a higher level of management, and that person will be skilled in building businesses' ability to do industry, okay? Now, that's not the same as the industrial engineer at Solano Community College, who actually is the janitor, okay? 2 extremely different neighborhoods, same job titles. So we'll just work with those 2 for the moment. The detail needs to be created and presented in that job title whenever one is to be sent out. So the actual work that's done for those positions, the job description, and specifications. Some of it may require more than just the fact that they've been doing it for a week or 2. Maybe the fact that they need somebody who's been doing this work 10, 15 years, maybe not that long, maybe 2 or 3 years. How much do you want to have to train that person other than for your facility? If they're brand new at it, do you have people who can train them? So years of prior experience is very important here. Okay, diverse population, recruitment, huge, and I've mentioned that already insofar as diversification. You should have people from all over the world with all kinds of skills. We don't want to know what they look like. We don't really care in the beginning because we want to see if we can find people with skills. And I say in the beginning. Now, if you're hiring people to do construction and they don't have the physical agility to do that kind of work, you're going to have a problem if they're just sending you a resume in. So maybe they're better at project management or helping with supplies or different things. And you'll have to find out when you interview people. So there are different organizations out there to work with, depending on the industry you want to use. And you always start off internally. So we hire people from within first, and then we go outside. And there's all kinds of web search engines and sources to use for hiring. LinkedIn has become one of the largest with Indeed for business people, whereas also Indeed is a crossover between all different industries compared to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is primarily business positions. Excuse me. So we're talking more about management, credentialed, certified positions. You see people in sales in LinkedIn. Now, Glassdoor is another company of this same kind. And one of the things about Glassdoor is they're a company, the same as Ladders, where they actually hire only people who are going to be making $100,000 or more annually. So you're going to be in supervisory and management positions when you look at those industries to be looking for people also. So we look at things this way. We have external again. We have quite a few avenues of locations where we can send out job opportunities to. And it goes both directions from the Human Resource Department out to the internal and external. Let me, I think I can draw on here. Maybe not. Okay. And so as the process goes, we start off at HR going down in the center, then we do the selection process. Selection process being breaking down resumes based on skills and education. And then of course the interview, hiring process, orientation and training. We'll get more in depth in next chapter into these. All right. We'll start here. Selection. Of course, there's the basic steps: completing the application, the interviews, and I say interviews, the initial and the follow-ups. And sometimes the follow-ups, there's the very first interview is generally on a telephone. Now that might sound funny. You may email, but the moment you pick up the phone, you are actually being interviewed. And many people don't realize this. That person on the other end of the phone is going to listen to how you communicate with them. So if you answer that phone with an attitude or nasty, or you have conversation that's going on that is inappropriate and you knew this call was coming in, you might be harming your opportunity. You want to get away from wherever you're at and have it quiet in the background so that communication can move forward. They will always do employment tests today. Very interesting, whether it's a written one or a physical one. In a lot of cases, you have to show people what you're capable of doing nowadays and not just write about it. You may be able to check the boxes, but you can't really do the work. I remember I was working for the county. I used to work at in-home support services doing accounting work. And I was handle all the payroll for them. And they were opening up another position in another department, and they wanted me to apply for it. So I did. And I made one mistake, one spelling error, and they were very upset that I didn't check my spelling very well. It was a chart with, it was really about numbers, but one of the headings, I spelled a word incorrectly, and I could see them cringe at me when they were talking. So it didn't go over well in that way, but I had another job waiting for me in the wings, so this one wasn't going to work for me anyway, but it was a great opportunity for me to experience what that was like. to have to do an actual project for them and turn that in. Okay, definitely background investigations. This happens all the time, background investigations now. I'd never be surprised at that. And you might have to have a physical exam if you're doing certain physical work. Now, we also have people who are older who are required to do physical exams if they're going to be in management. And we're seeing this right now with the presidential race. We saw this last year where people were getting sick and having to have surgeries doing things. And are they capable to live a longer life, at least 4 years while they're in office, to take care of their position? And so it's very essential to have to take care of your health or be able to pass those tests. And then there's the process of probation. Every job has a probationary period, whether it be even 30 days, 60, 90, 6 months, 9 months, or a year. And it's all different for all kinds of businesses. But you need to do well during that time period to stay there. Always be on time or early, do your job well, complete what's being asked of you in a good way, get along with others. Just hold out to get past that probationary period. It's kind of funny to say, it's kind of like I worked for the VA and I got injured on my job. And ironically, it happened during the last week of my 6-month probation. So they didn't actually let me go. I went out on disability because I was injured and had to have surgery. And they held my job for 3 months, but I had to wait a year before I could get my surgery. So they had to let my position go. Now I can always go back there, but things like that happen. Okay, contingent workers. So this is usually those who are being hired for part-time. They know it's only a contract that may only last maybe a week or two. It could be up to 6 months, a year, depending on the position. And this is very common in the world today. We've seen this really a tremendous amount during the last 5 years. A very large amount of contract and contingent workers. And the interesting part is they're usually younger. And I really highly recommend people go out and try jobs in all different industries. Get a job for a month or two. Go to a temp agency on purpose and go and try out an industry. See if it's for you. And of course, you're not going to get paid what all the employees at that job are getting paid for the same job. That's usually a little less. And sometimes it depends. You could be even getting paid more based on you're having to replace somebody who has a higher level of responsibility in a job. But it's a simple fact that they give you a paycheck, they take out the taxes for you, and you have that opportunity to learn. So another reason that companies hire contingent have to do with people on leave, pregnancies, for instance, maternal care, family needs, health issues, peak demand. We talk about that. That's the holiday seasons. We always see it. Macy's, all the big retail companies hiring usually August, September for the end of the year holidays. It's very common. And then as we're watching even now, uncertain economic times, there are industries that are blooming right now, for instance, in making masks and all kinds of medical gear where they need help. So people are coming on board that never did this before, but they're being given an opportunity because people need help. They're making money, which is wonderful. This is a sad thing. When a company chooses to hire a contractor instead of a full-time employee because they can't afford employee benefits. Keeping them under the radar of the number of hours will do that also. We have this with a lot of fast food industry, Burger King, Carl's Jr., all of the fast foods. If you're working under, I think it's 19 hours a week, they don't have to pay you benefits, which is really too bad, but that's how it works. But it saves the employer money. And then looking at interviewing employees intentionally for future opportunities. And this will come up a lot, future opportunities. If we haven't established that, you need to. I need to put you guys on hold for a moment. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to pause for a second. Yes, training, very essential, and development. So this also goes along with the career path concept too, that every employee, when they come on board, it's usually the first week or two where everything's scheduled for them. It may be immediate training, it may be down the road, but you need to become in sync with the business. And of course, I always look at short-term skills to get you going right away, and then you'll have more training for growth and long-term goals for the business, which will move a person forward for further opportunities also. So how they do that, they need to assess the needs of the business. What do they need the employees to be doing? And so they need to make sure, like if you have a gap in your the individual has a gap in their personal skills, we have to fill that gap. Because we want to hire them. There's somebody that's interesting to us. They look like they could be a very good asset for the business, and need to be able to meet the needs of the company. And then, of course, always training effectiveness, that lovely word of mine, effectiveness, efficiency. Is it efficient, what you're doing? And is it effective? Are we spending too much time and money on training? And if not, how are employees increasing their skills for the business and bettering themselves? Something to always be looked at and considered. So, as I mentioned, we have orientation on the job. Now, I didn't talk about apprenticeship. That gets into union work, and we'll talk about that next chapter. That's very important. Then we did talk about off the job and online training we're doing right now. Vestibule training. Now, that is an interesting concept, vestibule training, which comes in different perspectives for people. And what I know is that vestibule, and I have it right here. I want to read it to you. Let me find it. I thought I had it in front of me. Here it is. Training done in classrooms where employees are taught on equipment similar to that used on the job. And that's really important. Sometimes online isn't going to work. Sometimes just at the office isn't going to work, but you need a specifically designed classroom to do the training in with the right equipment. So that's called vestibule. Okay, then job simulation, where it could actually be done online, and I've seen a lot of applications be developed where you don't actually have to handle things, but you can still do the work. But when it's all hands-on, you need to do the vestibule. Okay. All right, now more about development and management. With the training, of course, there's always coaching going on. And I like the concept of understudy or ghosting, where you will follow someone around and work with them, or as you might be the person they may follow around, and you'll be shadowing them while they're shadowing you in a sense. Of course, job rotation is huge, where people can go from one position to another to get more skills and move along in the business. And then off the job, of course, is always essential to do to move on. Then we have networking. You've got to network with other industries and businesses that are similar to yours to learn more about how to build relationships. Because if you understand how other businesses are functioning, you can help learn about how to better your business. Talked about mentoring. Okay. Okay, diversity in management. This has been pretty much covered, really. We are doing this today. More women are in management. Actually, we have almost more female-owned small businesses in the world today compared to male-owned businesses and minority managers. It's growing immensely over time. So that's the essential aspect is people are stepping up. Women are stepping up and saying, I want to have a business of my own and just doing it. And that's wonderful. So we got to make sure that all people have opportunities to have a business and run businesses via management. Performance appraisal. All right. Your supervisor will be the first person who will be watching you. And then it will get transferred in communication to other people. But what's really essential is that appraisal process when your supervisor will go over things with you. And of course, talk about promotions, compensation, training, or termination. Now, anytime something goes wrong in a job, it has to be written down 3 times. See that? 3 times. 3. Make sure you know that one. 3 times before they can let you go. Unless your job is an as-is position and you're at-risk position where you can be laid off anytime. But if you are in a higher end position, you have 3 opportunities for them to terminate you, and you want to make sure that doesn't happen. So be careful of that because they'll write everything down, especially if you have a supervisor who isn't the greatest with you. Now, a 360 degree means all the people around you. And there are a lot of businesses nowadays, above, below, side of you, front and back of you, are asked, how's this person doing on the job? And it's become more common for this to be done and input from other peers so that people can see how you're really doing, because a lot of times people have a tendency when the supervisor walks in the room to change what they're doing to look good to the supervisor. And the supervisor knows that. So the supervisor will ask other people what's going on with this person. And it will be recorded. Not always audially, but in writing. Okay, so here's the different steps that are required. And you need to know these, okay? And you have to provide to the employee what is expected of them and how they are going to be rated so that they fully comprehend what's going on. They also have to be measurable and reasonable. Measurable means during a period of time, the kind of work they may have to do on production. And it's usually a period of time to start with and a reasonable period so that they know. Then always clearly communicated. They have to know what they are. And that's all they're being evaluated for. Nothing else. So only those standards that they're being evaluated for. Definitely have a conversation with employee about those results of the review, what they see. And it says taking corrective action. That's about the employee, but it's also about the employer to let the employee know what they could do to improve. Okay, now, if the employer doesn't offer anything to them in that conversation, we push to get to see if the employee is strong enough internally to speak up and say, I can do this, or they can offer to go do extra training because they know they need help. And that's what you really want to hear, them immediately jumping on the bandwagon to improve. So it shows how much they want the job and they're willing to stay. And how we use the results definitely to make future decisions with that employee and maybe even with the job itself. maybe the job title and the job description really don't match. And maybe this person's doing work that really isn't going to happen here in this position. Well, and you can only tell as time moves on. So that's important to consider. All right, we're getting close to the end of the class here. And I need to take roll. So let me take a break here on the video. And let's see, do we have, let me see here. I need to click on something here. Give me 1 second. I actually have a tool here. I should be able to click on this and it'll do a attendance for me. Give me 1 second. Hang in there. Still, oh, here we go. I have to do it while you guys are online, so give me 1 minute here to get it to work. Oh, I guess it's not going to do it for me. I'm trying. Give me 1 more second here. Okay, let me just get out my attendance roster. Okay, Sergio, are you on there? Oh, let me unmute all of you. Okay, Sergio, are you online? I thought I unmuted everybody. Unmute all. Let me do it again. I don't see Sergio. He's not online, is he? Okay. Julian, are you there? I can't tell. Is Julian online, you guys?
No.
Thanks. Sorry. Let's see. Isaiah, I got you. Darwin, I have you. Kristen, I have you. I don't see Pilar. Did Pilar join us?
I thought you said she dropped last time.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. You're right. She did. Tiasa, I have you. Michaela, I have you. John, Cassidy. Is Antonio on? Did anybody see Antonio?
No.
I don't see him either. Okay. Cameron. No Cameron? Okay. James, are you here today?
Yes.
Thank you. Nia,
James Jr.
Jack, I don't see Emily. I see Lewis. Okay, we're almost there.
Thank you, miss.
You're welcome. Joseph, I see you. Anissa, Nathaniel, Randy, are you here, Randy? I didn't see any Randy today. Okay. Paul, I see you. Peyton's not here today, huh? She's absent. She was here the other day. Scott, Dane, Anna,
Yep.
Addison, Tiana, Cody, Kayla, Liliana. No Liliana? Okay. Joy. Is Joy with us today?
I don't think so.
Yeah, she was here the other day. Ricardo, Everardo. No Everardo? Okay.
No.
Here the other day. All right. Brian's not here. And Aaron. Was Aaron on? Anybody see Aaron?
Nope.
I didn't think so either. Okay, thanks. All right, you guys. Any questions about where we're at so far on the lecture?
No,
Nope.
I'm pretty good.
Okay. It's kind of a detailed thing where I really just got to explain how to do all the different aspects of being a manager of the HR department. It crosses over, and we'll get more into it when we get to chapter 12. I think we'll be okay to do both chapters before the quiz. We should be all right. Yeah, a lot of doubling up there. Any other questions?
No.
Okay, well, I wish you guys a great weekend, and we'll see you back here next Tuesday.
Yeah, have a good one.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
You too. All right, bye for now.